I was driving back from Houston to Austin on a Sunday night in late October, the kind of damp cold that settles into your sleeves and refuses to leave. I missed my exit because the rain came down hard, blurring the white lines until the freeway felt like a river. I pulled off near La Grange to wait it out, navigating side streets lined with ranch houses and pecan trees that rattled in the wind. The wipers were smearing more than they were clearing, and when I finally parked under a streetlight, the bulb flickered and died like I'd spooked it. Across the road was a 2-story house with a wraparound porch. The paint was the faded, chalky kind that water carves into veins. A single green bulb burned over the front steps. It was an ugly color, not festive or warm, and it gave the house the look of a sick aquarium. The rain softened to a hush, and the moment felt like a held breath. My phone buzzed with a weather alert flood advisory, but I wasn't going anywhere until the storm passed. That's when I saw a shape move behind the porch screen, a small shadow, then a taller one, then nothing at all. I told myself the figures were a trick of the water and light. I cracked the window to hear the rain better. The air smelled like wet cedar and oil from the asphalt. Somewhere a dog barked and then immediately stopped, like it remembered something. The green bulb hummed. I watched it because the rest of the house seemed to blend into the night, and that light was the one anchor point in an otherwise shifting scene. The first strange sign came as I scrolled through my phone looking for a detour route. The map showed my blue dot drifting across the street, as if I wasn't in the car at all but standing on the porch under that green light. I tapped to recenter, and the dot returned to my car, then jerked back to the porch. The compass spun once, twice, and settled pointing toward the front door. I locked my doors without thinking. My heater clicked and blew cold. A woman's voice rose above the rain, a short phrase. A name maybe, but softened by the screen of the porch into something papery and thin. I turned off my radio to listen. Henry? It sounded like Henry, the second syllable leaking away. I couldn't see anyone, but the porch screen darkened in one corner, and the green bulb brightened as if it had been turned up a notch. The house didn't look abandoned, exactly. There were potted plants by the steps, a newspaper soggy and deformed on the top stair, but there weren't any other lights on inside and no cars in the drive. When I tried to convince myself it was fine that people sit on their porches in the rain in small towns, I noticed all the houses on the block were unlit. Curtains drawn. No TVs, no kitchen windows glowing. Just the green porch light and my headlights pointing uselessly into the drizzle. I decided to back out and find the main road. When I put the car in reverse, the rear camera glared white with rain streaks and then showed something else, a reflection or a lens flare. I don't know, 3 pale ovals hovering at the bottom edge of the screen like someone's fingertips pressed from the inside. They moved in a slow drag upward and vanished. My door thudded as if something had settled its weight against it. I hit unlock then lock again, the central locks chattering. I forced myself to look left. The window was fogged from my breath and the humidity, but in the fog, where you'd expect to see your own handprint if you wiped it away, there was a child's drawing crude. Watery lines traced by a finger, a stick house with a triangle roof and a circle in the door. The circle had a line through it like a staring eye with a lid. I wiped it. The line smeared and then reformed, the same drawing, a little darker. The green porch light flickered again and this time dimmed. Inside the screened porch, a dark figure leaned forward, arm extended, palm flat to the mesh. It was a woman, I think hair long and wet, dress clinging. But there was a smaller shape by her knee, child height, and between the two of them was a gap the width of a person who wasn't there. "Henry," the voice said, a little louder. The porch screen breathed in and out with the wind. And for a second I saw a third hand resting on the rail, no arm attached. Just a pale wedge of fingers like a dead fish on a cutting board. I should have driven then, bad roads or not. Instead, I cracked the window another inch, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Under the rain, a ticking sound started, out of rhythm with the drops. It came from my dashboard, from the air vents, from everywhere. The smell changed too. The clean cedar went stale, like standing water in a bucket left in a garage. The map app pinged and pinged, trying to make me look at it. I glanced down. The directions had shifted. Walk to the highlighted route, it said. Proceed to front porch. The blue dot wasn't me in the car anymore. It had fixed itself at the top of the stairs where the green light pooled. I don't know why, but that did it. I put the car in drive and pressed the gas. The tires spun on the slick, then caught. The street stretched longer than it had when I turned in, like the rain had unrolled it. House after house slid past, all dark. The green light behind me grew brighter in the rear view until it felt like someone had flipped on a high beam. I didn't look back straight on. I kept it peripheral because I had the sick conviction that if I gave it my full attention, I'd see something through the screen door watching me leave. I made 3 turns, then a 4th, and ended up back where I'd started. The green light waited, humming. I remember saying aloud, "I'm not stopping," as though the house could hear me. My voice sounded small. I took the next corner too fast and clipped a garbage can. It skittered, spilled, and as it rolled into the gutter, it struck something soft and hollow. A sodden newspaper slid apart to reveal a rubber rain boot, tiny, purple, standing upright as if a foot were in it. The boot wobbled in the water and tipped over, empty. "Henry," the voice called, as gently as a lullaby. On the 5th try, I found the main road by ignoring the map and following the sound of trucks on wet pavement. The green light dwindled to a pinprick in my mirror and then went out. Just blinked dark like it had never been on. The rain picked up again, and I drove to the all-night diner off the highway and ordered coffee with shaking hands. The waitress didn't look surprised. She refilled my cup twice and said there's always water in the bend there. When the creek overspills and those old houses don't drain right. Before I left, I asked the cashier if anyone on Pine Street had a green porch light. He paused, then gave a slow nod. "The Schultzes do," he said. "They put it up after the floods. Helps the volunteer rescue see the house in the dark. They lost their boy, Henry, 5 years back." He said it like a fact, not a story, and then he tore the receipt and slid it toward me. I didn't tell him the light was on tonight, or that it seemed to want me to walk up the steps. I didn't say anything about the drawing on my window because when I got back to the car, the glass was dry inside and out. No fog, no lines. Just the faint scent of something damp, and on my map history, an address I never searched, front porch. I haven't driven that shortcut again. The next time it rains in October, I'll take the long way around. But sometimes my phone buzzes at night with a location alert, like a friend sharing where they are. It never resolves, it just says, "on the porch." When I swipe it away, I think I hear the soft click-click of something ticking in the vents, and the word Henry brushed through the house like a draft. I rented an artist's casita outside Marfa for a week in January, when the wind licks the dust into lace and the distances make you feel like a dot on a map. The listing said, "Views of Chinati," but what it didn't mention was the old farmhouse across the scrub road. The first afternoon, I stepped out with coffee and noticed the farmhouse didn't face the road or the sun or anything sensible. It faced a blank stretch of grassland and a low arroyo as if it preferred a view of emptiness. The front door was on that side too, away from the track everyone used, so you had to circle through yucca and mesquite to get to it. I wouldn't have noticed any of this if the wind hadn't lifted a corner of the porch roof and made it clatter like loose teeth. Inside my casita was clean and white and quiet. A Calder print, a skinny table, a kettle that took forever to boil. The first night, I fell asleep to the sound of wind combing the grass. Around 2, the heater kicked on with a metallic cough, and something else woke with it, the distinct creak of a door moving in a slow, steady arc. There were no interior doors in the casita, only a sliding bathroom panel, so the sound didn't belong to my place. It came from outside, the wrong way house across the road. Swinging a door gently back and forth like someone testing it in the morning, I walked toward it, more curious than worried. The air smelled of frost and old sun. Up close, the house looked fine, no broken windows. No graffiti, just the wrong orientation, like it had been rotated away from town. I found a cow path that curved behind the mesquite to the front steps. The door itself was closed and latched. The creak had to be something else, maybe the roof. The porch boards were dry and pale where shoes had scuffed them over decades. In the dead center of the top step was a dark stain shaped like a map of Texas, but skewed. The panhandle too long. I heard voices then. Not from the house, but from the arroyo, 2 people talking low, the words indistinct. I peered into the ditch. The walls were cut clay, smooth as soap, and along the bottom ran a trickle of water despite the drought. A coyote paused, glanced at me, and moved on. The voices stopped. I decided I was being ridiculous and went back to make eggs. Strange signs started that afternoon. Photography tourists appeared near sunset to watch the famous lights dance on the horizon, but they set up their tripods facing the wrong way house instead. When I asked a couple which way the Marfa lights were supposed to be, they said, without looking at me, that way, and lifted their chins toward the house. Their eyes watered from the dust. We heard they move along the porch at night, the woman said. Faster if you watch from your car. Something in her tone suggested she was repeating someone else's instructions. At dusk, the house didn't light up the way a lived-in house would. It just acquired edges. The fields went lavender, the sky the color of old pennies, and the porch sharpened until I could count every nail in the railing. I stood by my window and felt a prickle along my arms, as if I had leaned too close to a static-charged TV. I told myself the wind carried distant sounds in weird ways out. That's what everyone says about West Texas. That sound travels. Even so, I recognized the creek again. It rose and fell with the gusts, a pendulum. I turned on the kettle to drown it out. Around 11, I gave up and got in my rental car. I told myself I'd drive into town for pie and come back sleepy. The wind had settled into long, steady breaths. When I reached the intersection at the end of the road, I checked my mirrors out of habit. Behind me, in the rental's rear view, the wrong way house looked like any old farmhouse, except that the porch posts were slightly out of parallel with the frame of the mirror, as if the mirror had tilted but nothing else had. I blinked and it corrected. At the stop sign, the car idled rough. A shape moved on the porch, someone stepping into the open and back again, quick like a child at a doorway. I told myself it could be a plastic bag, a gust, a shadow. Then I saw the same movement reflected in the passenger window, but inverted, stepping out when the porch figure stepped in, stepping in when the other stepped out. The glass showed 2 porches, one real, one mirrored wrong, and something crossing between them. I drove into town faster than I should have. The diner lights were comforting, neon and clatter, and I stayed too long over coffee. The waitress knew the house. She said it belonged to a family who tried to keep the wind off the front door by rotating the house in the 1950s, rolled it on logs until it faced what the father called the quiet direction. People laughed about it. The family didn't last. A girl got lost during a dust storm and was found in the arroyo days later, mouth full of silk, not far from where the porch looks. Back at the casita, the night had changed. The wind had died, which made every sound obvious. I could hear things breathing the heater, the water in the pipes, but under those familiar noises, a wooden complaint, a long sigh of grain against grain. I pulled the curtains and there it was. The house had turned again. It still faced the arroyo, but not precisely. It had rotated a few degrees toward me. The impression was so strong I felt dizzy. I took pictures before I could think better of it, then scrolled back to a shot from yesterday morning. The angles didn't match. The apex of the porch roof aligned with a different star. The dark stain on the step pointed a little more toward my door. I didn't sleep. The creak would stop for breath and then return, closer. At 3, my doorknob made the smallest sound, not a jiggle, just the shift of metal warming under a hand. I called out, "Hello?" And a soft reply came immediately from outside. "We're here." Plural. We. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing but pale wood and the idea of space. The kettle timer tripped on and I hadn't set it. The faucet shivered. A line of dust along the sill moved and wrote itself into a wavering arrow pointing to the wrong way house. I snapped. I flung open the door and stepped onto my stoop. The night air tasted of chalk and cold iron. The wrong way house waited, patient as a turned head. I walked to the road, barefoot, gravel biting my skin, and the porch deepened into a mouth. Something moved behind the posts. Not someone. Something like density, like a place where the world had thickened. I said the word stop, and the creak ceased. For a long minute there was only me and the cut black sky and the feeling of being watched by a window that had been a window so long it had learned how to look back. Then I felt the rotation, not with my eyes, but under my feet, the dust adjusting, the nearest blade of yucca pivoting by a hair. The horizon shifting a fraction of a degree. The wrong way house kept choosing, turning its face toward whatever had stepped outside to agree with it. That was all it wanted, for me to stand where it pointed. My breath fogged. From the arroyo came 2 voices, out of sync. "We're here," said one. "We are," said the other. The stain on the top step looked wetter now, almost fresh. I went inside and packed before dawn. The casita's door was stiff, like it hadn't closed fully in the night. As I drove away, my phone vibrated with an airdrop request from an unknown device named Front Door. The preview thumbnail was black. I declined. The wind rose behind me and the road dust turned, as if to watch. My cousin booked a weekend house on the river in San Marcos for tubing and barbecue, the kind of rental with a long driveway and a corn yellow exterior and a bench swing that groaned politely when you sat on it. We arrived in that heavy Texas summer heat that smells like cut grass and sunscreen. The key was in a lockbox, the host's rules typed and laminated on the fridge. There was one odd note. Please do not attempt to open the 3rd bedroom. It's used for storage. We counted rooms, 2 downstairs, 1 upstairs in the eaves behind a narrow door. The narrow door was the 3rd bedroom. It didn't have a knob, just a blank plate and a deadbolt turned horizontal. We shrugged. Rentals are full of quirks. We dragged coolers to the back porch and watched the river braid itself around cypress trunks. Across the water, a local kid cast for bass and waved when he saw us. My cousin's girlfriend, Maya, claimed the loft bedroom and took a nap. The rest of us unpacked, sweating through our shirts. The house had that faint, sweet rot smell of river places, like damp wood and old linen. It was familiar, not unpleasant. The first strange thing was a change in the temperature upstairs. When I went to tell Maya we were starting the grill, the air on the landing went cool enough to raise the hair on my arms. The AC was running, sure, but this was different, too localized. The narrow door had a thin line of light under it, bright as noon. And I heard the soft push of something against carpet, a step, then a second. I called, "Maya?" and heard the same number of steps in reply from behind the door. 2. Then the light under the door went dark, as if a person had placed their feet directly in the strip of brightness. I tapped the deadbolt plate with my knuckle. It rang dully, the way metal does when something on the other side touches it. Downstairs, laughter and music. My cousin turned up the radio, the old porch swing squealed, ice clinked in glasses. Maya came down a minute later, sleepy, ponytail loose, asking if we'd called her. We hadn't. We told her about the door. She shrugged. Storage, she said, like a charm against worry. That night, the river smoothed to a black ribbon and the cicadas started up their electrical hum. We played cards at the dining table, the kind with a lip that catches bottle caps. The third bedroom was a closed mouth at the top of the stairs. Around 10, someone knocked from the inside 3 soft taps. We all heard it and went quiet. My cousin stood, bravado swelling in the empty space where sense should be, and took the stairs 2 at a time. "Hello?" he said to the blank door. Tap, 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 the exact same rhythm in reply. He laughed, nervous, and tapped back. A moment later, there was a small additional sound not from behind the door, but from the stairwell itself, a scratch, like a shoe heel shifting. I realized all at once that we had arranged ourselves on the lower steps without thinking, as if we were in a theater facing a stage. We were waiting for something to enter. The air pressure changed ears full, like in an elevator. The house settled, or pretended to, and the fridge compressor kicked on, normal. I found the laminated rules on the fridge and read them again. At the bottom, in small type, there was an added line I hadn't seen earlier. Please return any borrowed items to their original place. I asked the room, did anyone borrow anything? No one had. The word borrowed snagged at me anyway. We slept poorly. Around 2 in the morning, my phone alarm chirped a tone I never use, the default one from years ago that I associate with college exams. When I checked the screen, there was no alarm set. The tone came again, not from the phone but from upstairs, a small chirp that could have been a child's toy low on batteries. It trilled twice, then stopped, then trilled once. A pattern. We lay there listening like we were eavesdropping on a conversation next door. Maya whispered, "It's Morse code." None of us knew Morse. We were too tired to be brave and too curious to be sane. We went upstairs as a group. The line of light under the door was back. It glowed warm like late afternoon sun. No bulbs in the house made light that color. My cousin pressed his ear to the wood. I pressed mine next to his. It was like pressing your face to a window on a summer day heat, then sudden cool. I smelled river silt and something like school glue. From the other side came a whisper that wasn't words exactly. It was breath shaped into sound, the suggestion of syllables that didn't quite assemble into language. I mouthed "hello?" and got back a breath that matched my cadence. An echo that wasn't an echo because it happened the barest instant before my own word left my mouth. Like a child anticipating a game that we should have left. We didn't. In the morning, the cypress shadows made the river look braided with smoke. The kid across the water fished in the same spot as before. When I lifted a hand to wave, he didn't wave back. He watched our porch, then pointed to the upstairs window and shook his head slowly. My stomach dropped. On impulse, I tried the deadbolt. It didn't turn. But the blank plate where the knob would be had a faint impression on it, as if a hand had pressed there for years. The metal was polished in the shape of small fingers. At noon, a departing family parked on the road and told us they'd stayed here last month too. The father was chatty. "Third bedroom's locked," he said, conspiratorial. "We heard a little traffic up there." I told my wife storage. His daughter, maybe 8, kept looking past us into the house. She had a rubber bracelet on her wrist that said "Be safe" in faded letters. She tugged my sleeve when the adults turned back to their car. "If you borrow anything," she said, "you have to put it back." I asked what she meant. She made a small circle in the air with her finger and said, "They get mad when you don't. They say it brings the river in the house." That afternoon, The heat broke with a brief, hard rain that left the wood steps slick. We grilled anyway. The cicadas recovered. The river slowed. When I went to pour more ice, I realized my phone charger was gone from the outlet in the hallway. Who took my charger? I called, and from upstairs, tap, tap, tap. I went halfway up, then stopped. There, on the top step, placed neatly as if aligned on a school desk, was my charger, still warm from use. The prongs had left 2 bright dots on the wood where they'd rested, and between them a faint damp line like something had dragged it from under the door and set it out for me. I picked it up and my fingers came away smelling of glue and river dot. We didn't sleep the second night. At 3, we heard that chirp again, the same pattern. The light under the door widened, not as if the door had lifted, but as if the room on the other side had dropped closer to the floor. We packed before dawn, an embarrassment of noise. The host texted to ask if everything was all right. I wrote back, yes, thank you. Everything as described. It felt like a test. When we carried the last cooler to the car, the kid across the river finally waved. He pointed to his ear and then to the 3rd bedroom window and gave a thumbs up, as if to say you heard it too. We nodded. He nodded. His fishing line trembled like a thought. A week later, my cousin sent a screenshot from the rental listing. The host had updated the rules. The last line in small type now read, "Please do not borrow. Please do not return. Please do not respond." The narrow door in the photos had a new knob. It was a child's knob, low, painted the same color as the wall, almost an apology. We haven't been back. Sometimes, when the AC kicks on in my apartment in Dallas, I hear 3 soft taps and the smallest chirp, and I make sure all my chargers are exactly where I left them. Take FM 170 along the Rio Grande far enough west and you'll see it. A concrete house that looks like a sculptor set a minimalist cube in the desert and went to lunch. No eaves, no porch, just a red rectangle and a steel door with a sun-blistered keypad. We called it the Red Box because the GPS refused to assign it a name. It was a friend of a friend's place, used occasionally by visiting architects who wanted to feel the line between design and landscape blur into bravado. The first evening we arrived, the wind lifted the dust into low sheets, and the house squatted in it like a thought. Someone couldn't finish. Inside was beautiful in a way that made you feel bad for existing in it. Polished concrete floors that echoed. A single long hallway that held sound like a throat. There were no interior doors. Instead, there were sliding panels flush with the walls, no handles, just a seam. If you closed them, they disappeared, and the room looked like a gallery. The house had exactly 4 windows, 1 on each cardinal direction, all fixed panes. No curtains. The light came in clean and uninvited. It started small. The north window displayed something that didn't match the others. At sunset, the west window showed the gold water of the river, the east showed the blue-shadowed ridge. South showed the road and the far line of lights on the Mexican side. The north showed brush and ocotillo. Then, as we were cooking tortillas on the little gas stove, the north window went slightly darker, the way a TV dims before a scene change. In its glass we saw a hallway that wasn't ours, a narrower one with a concrete floor glossy with recent mopping. The angle was wrong. Our hall bent left and the one in the glass bent right. Reflection, my friend said. I believed him until I noticed the exit sign glowing in that other hallway's far ceiling, reversed but readable. We didn't have exit signs. I told myself it was a trick of panes and angles. The desert messes with your sense of scale. The wind picked up and the house seemed to push against it with its slab shoulders. We slid 2 of the panels closed to keep the sand out and the space changed character, as if someone had shifted the set between acts. The hallway deepened. The stove made a polite cough and went quiet. When I went to check the propane, the keypad on the exterior door lit up by itself with a grid of zeros. Zeros filled the display, and then one by one they cleared. As if someone had typed a passcode in reverse. After dinner, the temperature fell fast. The air smelled like metal and rain that never comes. The 4 windows dimmed to perfect squares. In the north pane, the not our hallway brightened slightly, its exit sign a small sun. A silhouette passed across it quick, like a person late to something, and we all said, "Did you see?" and then laughed too hard. We slid the north panel closed. The room felt blind on that side, and I knew if I opened it again I'd find the seam warm to the touch. Like a hand had leaned there from the other side at midnight. We tried to sleep in the main room, sleeping bags on the floor to avoid choosing separate spaces. The house ticked as it cooled. In the dark, the panels registered their seams as faint lines, and beyond them, the windows were oil-slick squares. I woke to a soft tone, not a beep, something cleaner, like a finished loading sound. The keypad glowed a gentle green. The door remained closed. I lay still. The tone sounded again, and a third time, each one closer, each one not so much a sound as a confirmation. Then the long hallway was not empty. You know the feeling when a person steps into your peripheral vision, how your body registers presence before your head turns. That, but the presence moved without footsteps. It was a pressure, like a door somewhere had opened and a column of air had gone past. It turned at the corner and paused by the north panel and then continued toward the south end of the house. The exit sign glow from the north window leaked onto the panel seam. A whisper of green on the floor. We told ourselves it was nothing and sat up. 3 grown adults cross-legged like kids, listening to the dry breath of the wind and the too clean beep of the keypad. "What if it's a security system?" my friend asked. "Like remote testing." That was the first reasonable sentence anyone had managed in an hour. We nearly believed him until a line formed on the concrete. No, not a line. A darker strip as if something wet had been dragged from the door to the center of the room. It dried in seconds. In its place, not exactly a stain but an absence of dust, a path. It led to the hallway, bent right where ours bent left, and stopped at the closed north panel. I slid it open. I wish I could say I saw another room mirroring ours. I didn't. I saw a narrow concrete corridor lit by a light I couldn't locate, the air cool like a museum's. Down it, in perfect silence, moved a shadow shaped like a person with no details a cutout. It moved with a speed that became more wrong the more I watched, steady but arriving faster than it should, crossing distance without taking time. It passed a doorway on its right that our house didn't have, and something in that doorway followed its movement like an eye tracking. I pulled the panel closed. It met my hand with slight resistance, as if a draft pushed from the other side. We decided not to open any panels after that. We turned on music low. It didn't reach the corners. Around 3, the keypad beeped 3 times and went dark, hard dark, no standby. My friend whispered, "Power saver." The concrete absorbed the whisper. At 4, the south window flickered, a brief frame skip that showed the road empty when it had headlights a second earlier, then corrected to show 2 red taillights already farther away than they could be. By dawn, the desert returned to the desert. The wind took a day off. The river wore a band of silver. We left as soon as the sun made the house feel smaller. On the drive out, my phone caught a sliver of service and delivered a pile of notifications. One was an email bounce from an address I hadn't sent to, no reply at exit.local. The subject line said, "Your passcode was accepted." No body. No attachments. The timestamp was exactly midnight to the second. I deleted it. A few miles down the road, the red box shrank in the mirror until it was a red dot and then a memory. The keypad glowed in my rear view for as long as the house remained visible. It stopped glowing only when I could no longer turn around. My grandmother's friend, Miss Evie, lived in what we all called the painted house because someone had painted the windows on the western side rather than replace them after a storm in the 70s. They were perfect. Trompe-l'oeil, glossy panes, little highlights, even the suggestion of lace curtains. From the street, you couldn't tell they were solid. Up close, you saw brush strokes and hairline cracks. It was charming in daylight and odd at night when light should have shone through and didn't. After my grandmother died, I checked on Miss Evie in the evenings, bringing her groceries and listening to the weather on her kitchen radio while thunder tested the eaves. The night it happened, the air felt boiled. Crickets sawed too fast. The clouds stacked themselves against the pine line like a herd. We ate peaches out of a jar and talked about nothing. When the first drops hit the porch roof in thick, widely spaced coins, Miss Evie said, "They'll watch tonight," as casually as telling me to take an umbrella. I asked who. She looked at the painted windows and said, "The ones who don't like the western light." It was something an old person says, a metaphor, and I smiled, waiting for the point. It didn't come. The storm came instead, low and muscular, crawling on its knuckles. The radio hissed and popped. The lights dimmed and steadied. We sat in the front room where the real windows were, and the backyard became a flicker book of pine trunks. The painted windows did their trick. From certain angles, the illusion deepened. I kept glancing at them, expecting to see the reflection of lightning. The paint stayed night flat. A little after 9, someone knocked on the painted glass. 3 knuckles, polite. I thought it was branches until I heard the second set of knocks answer from the painted window farther down. The sound was crisp, as if on the other side the paint were not paint, but good glass. Miss Evie didn't look frightened. She folded a dish towel and set it on her lap. "They'll go around," she said. "They always test first." The knocks progressed along the wall, window to window, a tour. At the last one, the knock was returned from just inside the room where no window existed at all, only a bookshelf backed by studs. The sound came through wood like a tongue pressed to teeth. Strange signs continued in small, domestic ways. The smell of ozone laced with the scent of chalk. The clock on the mantel paused for a full breath, then caught up fast with a stuttering tick. The lampshade turned slightly on its own until the seam faced the painted wall. I tried to laugh it off, to ask Miss Evie whether she'd had this act before, but the question came out thin. She said her mother had the windows painted after a boy broke one with a rock and never replaced it because the paint held better than glass in storms. "They prefer paint," she said. "It keeps them from leaking in. Most nights." She took my hand like I was the one who needed comfort. The storm peaked in a roar that made conversation ceremonial rather than functional. Between thunder, voices threaded no words, just the human cadence of voices carrying through. They weren't outside. They were not in the room. They were ... between. That's the word that kept coming to mind. Between the paint and the wall, between the windows that weren't windows and the idea of windows. I went to the nearest painted pane and touched it. The brush strokes were raised. The paint was cool, then unexpectedly warm under my fingers. As if the wall had blood in it, lightning laid the yard open and I saw something in the brief scan. A doorway where there wasn't one. A rectangle of dark against the siding, precisely where the center painted window would be if you could peel the paint away. In the next flash, it was gone. The radio choked on static, and from inside that mess came a phrase, "Don't turn them." The radio swallowed the last word. Miss Evie's hand tightened on mine. "They mean the latches," she said, and laughed a small laugh that had no humor in it. There were no latches. The windows were paint. The phrase scraped at my thoughts anyway. The knocks changed character. They were not taps now, but a rubbing knuckles dragged side to side, mapping the dimensions. At the midpoint they paused, and from the paint came the tiny sound of a fingernail catching the edge of a scene that didn't exist. I felt the pull of whatever was on the other side, a desire so simple it seemed bigger, to open. Not to harm, not yet. To test whether the world could be made to agree with their insistence that there was a window where there was only paint. I held my breath, and while I did, something decided. The paint moved. Not much. Enough to disturb the brushstrokes so they rippled like wet. Miss Evia said, "No," with the same authority she used to refuse a second slice of pie, and the movement stilled. Thunder rolled, and in the seams of that sound the room answered back. The bookshelf rattled in the exact rhythm as the rain hitting the porch unsettling because it matched. Then came a slow hinge noise from a hinge that didn't exist. The wall exhaled cold. I grabbed duct tape from a drawer and started crossing the painted panes, the way you tape real glass before a storm. It left dull silver lines over hand-painted shine. The house didn't approve. The lamp sputtered and the clock skipped again, but the cold draft stopped. The knocks retreated. From the yard, the voices kept their murmur. I imagined people standing a foot beyond the siding, all facing inward. I imagined someone testing the painted latch again with the patience of rain-working stone dot by 11. The storm sagged into drizzle. Exhaustion made everything smaller. I cleaned up peach jars. Miss Evia dozed in her chair, her mouth open a little, breath fierce for such a tiny woman. The duct tape on the paint held. I told myself I had been dramatic. I turned off the radio, and in the sudden quiet I heard a sound that in daylight I would have missed paint drying. If you've ever painted a room, you know it. A delicate crackle as the skin tightens. This was that sound sped up. The paint contracted against something that didn't want to be excluded. It made a soft, persistent complaint, like a zipper tugged against cloth that didn't want to give. When I stepped outside to smoke and scold myself, the air was washed clean. The porch boards were wet. Pine sap made small amber domes where drops had fallen. From the western wall came a smell that was not paint and not rain. It was colder, thinner, like the smell inside a stairwell between floors. I touched the siding and found a line of moisture that had not come from the sky. It ran from the height of the painted window down to the foundation. On my fingertip, it shimmered like a mirage and then sank into my skin without leaving dampness. I flicked my hand as if I could shake it off. Inside, Miss Evie was awake again. "They hate to be reminded," she said. "That they're shut in?" I asked. She tilted her head. "That they're shut out," she corrected. We didn't talk more. I stayed on the couch. The night moved its furniture around in small ways. At 2:11, the clock hands both pointed straight down, not possible, and stayed like that for one long breath before springing back. The duct tape lifted in one corner and pressed itself down again as if a hand had dealt with it. In the morning, the painted windows looked like they always had, charming and a little ridiculous. The duct tape sat there ugly as sin. I peeled it off, half ashamed. Under the tape, the brush strokes were altered. Where I had crossed the paint, there was now a minute misalignment, as if the painting had been repainted quickly in the night to hide not just the scarring of tape, but something that had nearly gotten through. At the baseboard below the middle window, a tiny curl of dried paint lay like a fingernail clipping. I pinched it, and it snapped in my hand with the brittle sound of a thin shell. Miss Evia lived another year. At her funeral, someone joked about those silly painted windows, and everyone laughed because what else are you going to do? I went by the house once more before it sold. The new owners had plans to restore the west wall with real glass. They were excited about evening light. I swallowed my advice. It sat in my chest like a stone. Weeks later, I drove past at dusk. The new glass shone beautiful and honest and exactly wrong. In the reflection of the middle pane, I saw 3 figures on the porch where no one stood. They didn't wave. They didn't move. They held still the way a painting does when the viewer hasn't yet stepped close enough to make it change. I didn't stop. I didn't knock. The next morning, I woke to a sound in my apartment like fingernails testing drywall, and a familiar, thin draft coming from a wall with no windows at all.